a live conversation about this, and I didn't charge my phone, and it died after like 8 minutes, which was pretty comical. So let's see if I can actually go into my live here and change some of the settings. Last performance was there. I thought there was a section I could go to that actually shows what I'm doing live right now. I can see the chat room. This might be it right here. Oh, we definitely have to change the thumbnail on that. There we go. So now we got the chat room open in the background. That's a good step. Let's see what we got here. Edit, customize. We'll customize stuff later on. Oh, the thumbnail, terrible. Hello, welcome to the live. I'm getting things set up. Literally just went live about a minute ago. How are you doing today? I want to talk about the New Age practices that a lot of folks try to associate with ancient practices, specifically with witchcraft, because I'm hearing a lot of folks say, oh, I'm a witch and I practice witchcraft. It seems like, I feel like the term witch has been universally the go-to term for a lot of people for some time. And I feel like individuals use this term because they don't know what else to use. And one of the things that I've tried to do a video on before is about the fact that we don't necessarily have to go with labels at all. People do go with labels, and that's fine. You can always look for a label, but does it really matter? And if we're picking labels, like, what makes you decide on the label? Is the term witch used because so many people are just so familiar with it? But then I bring up the question, then how do you define witchcraft? That is one of the things that I think is the biggest issue I have with a lot of some of the new modern practices, is people will throw out a term and they act like it associates them with a group who also use the term. So someone says they're a witch, they talk with others who say they're a witch, and then they get in fights and arguments because they practice it differently. Because what witch means and what witchcraft is varies from that person to person. And I think that's where it does a disservice. Now, you do have some organized groups. Now, that's actually something else that I think is worth bringing up, is I find it interesting that so many people are so focused in on wanting to learn until they realize they have to pay to learn. So anytime there is some sort of like school or organization that's willing to teach for money, nobody wants to pay for it. Same can be said for books. There might be some good books by some great actual historians out there. Nobody wants to buy them. They want to find everything for free. Now, I don't think that applies to everyone. I think everyone's different. But there's been quite a few that I've run across. They're more focused on only going to half-price books, pick up their books. And in many cases, and don't get me wrong, I've done the same. A lot of the books in my collection are from half-price books. Because, you know, if you can find it more affordably and cheap, why not? The problem I'm running into as I'm looking through a lot of these books is, where is the author getting that information from? And this goes back to the statement that I continuously bring up in almost every video and short and TikTok video I do as well, is I bring up the fact that we need to start sharing our resources. Put your resources out there for others to review and make up their own opinion about. And I wonder if some folks don't share their resources because they're afraid to admit where they originally heard it from, or they don't have good confidence in it. They would rather say, oh, well, this is what you do in this practice. Again, let's specifically talk about witchcraft for right now. This is how you practice witchcraft. How do you know that? I just do. Well, that's not good for conversation, especially if you're trying to have a conversation with others, especially if those others happen to be new to a particular path. And even though I've said it in previous videos before, I'll say it again. I'm not a witch. I do not practice witchcraft. I've just studied it. But I've run across witchcraft. I've run across a lot of people that are part of the New Age revival reconstruction movements, and a lot of them tend to use the term witch for themselves, which I'm not criticizing them for. I'm just trying to understand more. Spent a lot of time. Let's see, how long has it been now? Holy crap, I need a calculator. What are we in? We're in 2022 now, right? Let's see. So 27 years ago. was how long ago? 1995. So like, yeah, actually that sounds about right. It's back in like 95. A lot of individuals you'd come across, like we were happy if we found any book on any topic and we got super excited. And you run across a lot of people who will share a little bit of information, but they don't tell you where they got it from. Some of us would pass around books dealing with all sorts of topic. Back then, witchcraft and Wicca were the two big ones back in the 90s. They were huge. You'll come across the occasional thing that was like shamanism, spirituality type stuff, occasional Native American practice, indigenous people. But most of the stuff, most of the books that you found in half-price books or on Llewellyn was all witchcraft and Wicca. And now that we have more access to the internet, now I'm starting to realize that maybe some of those sources should have been questioned a while ago. How's it going, creature? Welcome. Not much, just having a little live. Haven't had one, well, I had one yesterday, but I've been slacking on some videos, so I figured I would get into doing live and start interacting with my audience a little bit more. I do plan to do some more videos. I want to cover this topic in a little bit more focus rather than just an open conversation in a future YouTube video. I'm not sure if I'm going to film that this weekend or next weekend or at least sometime before the end of the month. But I do want to put out some more videos on it because I think it's important to not only get folks thinking, but having folks start questioning things. Like I was just saying, like back in the 90s, we would get super excited if we found a book or had someone tell us something, but nobody really ever questioned if it was authentic or where it came from, especially when enough people repeated it. You know, if you have people repeating the same thing, you just assume that it's accurate, right? Awesome. Good to see you. Hope you're well. I'm doing okay. Not too bad. Dealing with some stuff. Was between jobs there for a while, which sucked. But I'm working again, so that's always good. Family's got some health issues. But aside from that, everything else is pretty good. How about yourself? How you doing? I was going to try to change the image behind my stream. I'm doing well, thank you. Awesome. What have you been studying these days or reading up on? Let's find a generic image, something that might be more easily utilizable, blah, blah. That's not specific to someone's channel or anything. There you go, just picture the moon. That would be cool. You know, that right there, just thinking about the moon alone makes me wonder, because there's usually a lot of associations with not only witchcraft, but a lot of New Age practices that have a fondness for the moon and the moon phases. And it's like, so where does that come from? Now, if we look specifically at witchcraft, we do know, let me change this real quick, change. Why did I not save it? I thought I saved it. Was it under downloads? It's probably under downloads. Nope, it's not under downloads either. Interesting. Where did my picture go? It's on my desktop. Interesting. My assumption with the association with the moon stuff is like the triple goddess of the moon seems to be really popular among modern witchcraft, but it's like, why? Based upon what? One of the books that I was reading recently from 1899 mentions specifically Diana, and Diana is a goddess that is associated with the moon, and I'm wondering if that where the association with the moon and witchcraft comes from. The question is, how accurate is that? Again, question everything. There's always an original source for things that come out, and then people start repeating them, and everyone does it, and it's just the way things are done. I did a video recently on talking about cleansing your space, and a lot of people like to use the indigenous tradition. Hello, son of Sothis. Welcome to the stream. How are you today? I've been looking into Tartaria. It's so interesting. I've never even heard of that. Where does that come from? Tartaria, the mystery of an empire lost. Let's see. Was a blanket term used in Western Europe literature and cartography for a vast part of Asia bounded by the Caspian Sea. Interesting. Yeah, I'd not run into that term before. That's pretty cool. It's a lost civilization. I believe so. That's what I've heard. I'm doing good. Awesome. Hello, Loki Kai. Hail, welcome. How are you today? Loki K. I might have mispronounced that. Sorry about that. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, we're just talking right now. As I was mentioning how some traditions, like, people just repeat it, and you hear enough people repeating it, and people forget where it came from originally. Like talking about the moon, since I was trying to add that as like the image for my live, just like have a full moon in the background. And I'm wondering if the full moon associations have to do with, if we go back far enough, we can find references to Diana, the goddess Diana, and she's associated with the moon. And I'm wondering if that where some of the original moon phases being associated with witchcraft comes from. Could be, possibly. And then Creature here was talking about doing research on Tartaria, and I've actually not even heard that term before, which is awesome. I've heard it was Diana. Yeah, that's the assumption I make, but I know, like, because we talk in New Age traditions. See, now I'll call them Reconstruction Revival stuff, because they are, as far as I know, they are inspired by ancient practices to a degree. Now, how much of the ancient practices we know, that's questionable. Is it ancient because we have some customs and cultures that survived? So they were ancient customs that modern cultures are doing? I think that's where we can learn a lot. Or is it because we had some old books or stories that referenced it, and then people just make the assumption? I question how much has actually survived as far as passed from word of mouth. And I think we need to be careful, not just in researching or practicing when it comes specifically to witchcraft, but I think any of the New Age Reconstruction movements, especially, oh my goodness, I probably should do a live specifically focused on the Norse traditions, the Scandinavian traditions, just due to the fact that there are so many people that are getting into it now because of movies and TV shows. And that's fine. You can get into whatever path you want for any reason. It doesn't matter why you're inspired or drawn to it. But you have people that are straight up watching, like, the Vikings TV show, and they're emulating that. And that has no historical reference. Well, okay, maybe not no historical reference. Very, very, very little of what you see in that show has anything to do with actual history. But people are emulating it like it's the way to practice. You'll see people getting tattoos, and they're getting tattoos that are modern tattoos, and they're calling them Viking tattoos. It's like, first of all, why are you trying to look like a Viking? Because that was a specific thing that was done, like, that basically it means someone who comes from an inlet or bay. Vikinger, it's someone who is traveling from a bay or inlet on a boat, usually. And you could be trading for, you could travel, raid, explore, settle. There's like many reasons that people would go on a Viking. But with that, people are like seeing the show, and they're trying to associate everything they see in the show. Like I said, these symbols, there's like some modern Icelandic, and I say modern from like the 1800s, the Hold manuscript has symbols like Egishjálmur and the Vegvisir, and people are acting like these are ancient Viking symbols, and they're not. They're from more modern Iceland from the 1800s. The time period, the Viking era actually ended, I would say, 1066, I think, is when Sweden converted. So that's when that era ended. So these symbols were from after that era, 800 years after that era, and people are still trying to associate it with it because they'll see stuff in TV shows and movies. And like the shaved heads, like they'll shave the size of their heads and they'll grow their hair long into a braid because they did it in the TV show. We don't have any evidence of that being a hairstyle at all from old Scandinavia. Not to mention the outfits. Oh my goodness. But yeah, we see this a lot. And even in shows like, since I was originally going to talk about witchcraft during this stream, you see TV shows and movies like stuff like Charmed and The Craft. And people are looking at that and they're using that as inspiration and they're trying to repeat that. I haven't heard it in a while, but I've heard people use the term what was it, Mano or something like that is what they called it in the movie. And they were trying to describe that as like, this is their deity and stuff and what it's associated with. People got to look more into history than pop culture. Yes. Yes. That's kind of my point that I'm getting to. It's like, question where things are coming from. Like, if people are sharing ideas and trying to inspire each other, that's great. That's fantastic. And if you're just inventing something new, fine. Tell people that. But to sit here and see something that is a new idea and then try to sell it off as fact and actual history, that's where my focus has been lately. That's what I've been doing with my time, is I've been trying to look for historical references, looking for actual historians. And people will give me guff sometimes and say, well, this stuff was passed in secret by word of mouth. Okay, then it's the telephone game, and there's no way of proving or backing up what you're claiming. I know how you feel. Yeah, it's frustrating, because I'm very passionate about researching and learning stuff, and the years that I've spent looking at stuff is just, did I waste my time? Like, because a lot of the sources that I've used throughout the years, I don't know how accurate they were or are. Yeah, Viking helmets don't have horns in Norway museums. Right. Apparently, see if I can remember the play. There was a German play that introduced Vikings with horned helmets, and because of that play, ever since then, people think Vikings have horned helmets. Not only is it impractical, but we can look at archaeological finds. We can see what the actual helmets look like, and they were basically smooth, flat skull caps. Sometimes they'd get fancy and get chainmail down to the shoulders. Sometimes they would have the eyepiece or just the single nose guard, and not everyone had a helmet. In many cases, when people went on a Viking, which I think, as I understand it, was an action. A Vikinger was someone who would go on a Viking, as I understand it. And when you would go on a Viking, it was because you needed something in life. Most of the people in Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, they were usually farmers. They were looking for land, or they were looking for goods and stuff so they could take care of their family. So in many cases, not all of them were professional warriors. They would just get on a boat together, go raid, and come back. So they might have like just an axe or some sort of a pole arm. If they were actually more of a professional warriors, they might actually have chainmail armor, or the helmets, or the shields, or the swords, which are very rare. A lot of the swords were crap anyway, and they'd break. I would think most people would know that Vikings didn't wear horned helmets by now. You would think. You really would, but I don't know. I don't know if they do know that. I really don't, because you still see some ridiculousness. But even with the horned helmet thing aside, there's still a lot of things that are just not factual that people are still repeating to themselves. I wish I knew more about Viking culture because I'm a descendant of them, but so much of their history has been bastardized. Right. So some of the best sources, in my opinion, you can look at, there's some folks here on YouTube that I like to watch. One of them is Dr. Jackson Crawford. Wonderful historical resource. There is a book that I have, Men of Terror, and the author of that used to have a modern reenactment stuff. He has a website still. You can try to find his website. But his name, why is it slipping my mind? I can see his face. I can see his beard, his hair. Crawford is the one I already mentioned.
Oh, sorry.
It's the other one that I actually had a chance to talk to through emails that I bought his book. Actually, his book was bought for me for one of the holidays.
Oh.
Why can I not remember his name? It's like right on the tip of my tongue. I'm just gonna grab his book because it's literally right here. Short. William R. Short. William R. Short's another fantastic resource. And then there is Erithurger. Erithurger is also here on YouTube. He's a great resource as well, historical. One of the things he started doing is he started adding his resources in the end of his videos so that you could look them up yourself. And I'll put links below after this live for those of you that are interested. But yeah, there's a lot you can start learning about the culture. There's some, now this book, we call them Vikings. I got at the History Museum when me and my wife went to see the exhibit where we actually got to see some artifacts and stuff. And that's the thing. It's like looking, because I'm descended from them too. A lot of people are because they traveled a lot. And my mother was actually born in Reykjavik, Iceland. So, like, yeah, direct descendants there. And it's interesting to look at some of the stuff that they used to do and wear and work with, their tools and their clothes and their jewelry, and what people are doing with them today. I'm just like, where are you getting this stuff from? Like, I know there's a huge time gap, like between 1066, when, like I said, the Viking era actually ended, and when did Snorri Snorkelson? So he was an Icelander, and he wrote the Poetic Edda. I want to say he wrote that in 1200 something. I'm gonna look up because I've got references. I write a lot of my stuff down. 1270 CE, he wrote the Poetic Edda. So like 200 years between the end of the time period and the modern period. And that's the thing. It's like people get inspired, and they like stuff like that. They like that culture. They like those people, but they don't want to do the research. They want to do the hearsay bullshit. And like I said, if you want to create something new, fine. Like apparently there's this new thing people are coming up with, like the 9 Noble Virtues, the hammer test. None of that is historically accurate. There is no reference for that. That is New Age made up BS. And it's fine if people want to do that. If they want to create it and make it part of their own, if they want to do that. But to tell the whole community or new people, oh, you can't wear Mjolnir because you haven't gone through blah, blah. No, that's your path. Don't try to enforce your path on other people. Let them do their own thing. Let them discover things for themselves. Read the sagas, read the Eddas. Get involved with the actual culture of those people, because traditions don't completely die out. So I really think that we can look at modern culture, how people do things in modern times in those countries, and get a feel for what they might have done. Remnants are always left over. My wife is basically Polish. She's a Polish American. I call her Polish American. But her mother came from Germany and her dad came from Poland. Originally, her grandparents came from Poland as well, on her mom's side as well. So Polish, like DNA test, like 90% Polish practically. And there is this Polish phrase. What's that Polish phrase your mom says that translates into lightning strike you?
Oh, God, I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, lightning strike you down.
Yeah, there's this Polish curse, like where you're like yelling at someone, basically like cussing them out type of curse, not like curse, but like cussing out curse, and it translates into "May lightning strike you." And the word for lightning is Perun, and if you look up Perun, that's actually a Slavic god. It's a Slavic deity. Interestingly enough, the Slavic deity Perun pretty much looks like a combination between Thor and Odin. So he's like associated with being like the ruler of this deity group, the Slavic deities, which we don't have a lot of information on. He usually has a hammer with him. He's usually the good guy, and yeah, he has different associations that are very, very similar to what you would see associated with Thor and Odin. It's easier to make things up than to do real research. Yes, but I don't mind people making things up. I just want them to acknowledge it. Like, if you're going to make something up, then okay, tell people that. Don't just like mix it together and act like it's something different. Like another one associating both what we're talking about now with witchcraft, I'm hearing a lot of people say that they're practicing Norse witchcraft. Really? And how are you doing that? How's that working out for you? Because there's a few problems there. The first thing is people are calling themselves Volva or Vitki. Volva is a term for basically a female practitioner of magic, essentially, in Norse Scandinavian culture. And a Vitki would be like a male practitioner. We don't know what they used to do. We have no record of how they used to practice. We have terminology of some of the things that they might have done. There is actually, I can't remember. I want to share the references so you can all look this up, and I'm trying to find in my mind where I originally saw it. But one of the things that I was watching and reading about, and it might have been Edith Harger, one of his videos, because like I said, I just recommended him as a resource. They were talking about, or was it Crawford? Crawford or Edith Harger, one of the two of them. If you look up about the Volva, apparently they would practice their art, and they would travel from village to village and town to town and trade their magical practices for room and board. But again, we don't know what those magical practices were. One word for it was seidr. Now, here's the thing that a lot of people start arguing about is seidr was a female practice. It was only done by women. It was very unmasculine for a man to practice seidr. Now, Odin learned seidr, and it specifically, I think they even referenced in one of the sagas that he wore a dress when he was learning it, because he was all about knowledge and wisdom and wanted to know everything. But then you have other practices like Goldr. Now, Goldr is like an intonation, it's like using your voice, it's like a sound. So is Goldr a type of seidr? Some people translate seidr as magic, but is magic really the right word? Because if you look at the Scandinavian culture, it was ingrained with their everyday activities. It was something they did on a regular basis. It wasn't something they separated out. So they might have had these individual practices. So there's seidr and Goldr and Talfr, which is creating like talismans and amulets. So they have these little different practices. Maybe they could all fit into an umbrella term of magic, but their culture doesn't really work the way we think about it in the West today in modern Western society. So when you try to interpret and translate things, you have pieces missing and you have things that are left out. But again, I would argue that anyone calling themselves a Norse witch today, I don't think that applies. I mean, if you're reviving the word, fine, and making it something different, but we don't know what it was, so you can't really connect yourself to what it was. You find the same thing specifically in modern witchcraft circles. There is the practice of Wicca. Wicca is a type of religious practice. It's a modern movement that is a type of witchcraft, I guess you could say. Most Wiccans call themselves witches. Not all witches call themselves Wiccan because they're not the same thing. As far as I know, Gerald Gardner created witchcraft. I'm sorry, I apologize, I misspoke. Gerald Gardner created Wicca in 1940. And people will argue with me about that. And they'll say, oh, Wicca is old and ancient. Is it? Let's look at the actual word and the etymology behind Wicca. Wicca, if you actually look at how it's spelled, W-I-C-C-A, and you look up the etymology behind the word, it's actually the root word that turned into witch. So witch's origin word is Wicca, but it's actually not pronounced Wicca, because apparently in Old English it's pronounced Witcha, which eventually turned into witch. Witcha referred to a male sorcerer practitioner. There's a female version, which is W-I-C-C-E, which is witche, I think it's pronounced. Is Wicca based on occult magic? To a certain degree, yes. There is high magic, occult magic, ceremonial magic, and different types of practices within Wicca, and there's different traditions. So some are book-trained Wiccans that will go out of books like that you see from Raymond Buckland, Gerald Gardner, or Scott Cunningham. So they'll do their practices based upon that. Like Wicca Guide for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham was huge back in the 90s. A lot of people use that book. Living Wicca was also by Scott Cunningham. And I know Gerald Gardner had a few, Silver Raven Wolf, Raymond Buckland, they all had a couple books, and they would go back and forth. Some of them would use Wicca and witchcraft interchangeably, depending on the person. But again, the etymology, the core word, today, individuals would say that they are a Wiccan practicing Wicca, but the Old English words, the Anglo-Saxon word, witcha and witche, witcha refers to the practitioner, not the path. Apparently the path was referred to as W-I-C-C-I-A-N, which is Witchian, I believe it's pronounced. So a witcha would practice Witchian, but we don't know what that practice was. We know what the words were, and people talked about it, but there was not like a guidebook for how you practice it. So from what I understand, Gardner created a modern version of witchcraft and named it Wicca based upon the old Anglo-Saxon word witcha. And then he basically pulled in a whole bunch of Druidry, because apparently he knew Ross Nichols. Now, I mentioned this in my other live video I did yesterday before it died, and this is what I want to do, my witchcraft versus Wicca part 2. I want to talk about a lot of this. But apparently he knew Ross Nichols, who was basically the founder of OBOD, Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Modern practice, they've been going on, I guess you could trace their lineage back to about 300 years, because we don't know what the ancient Druids used to do either. And a lot of their holidays and celebrations are practiced in Wicca and in modern witchcraft. Some witches will practice the Wheel of the Year. They call them the Sabbats and the S-Sabbats. And if you look at those practices, they're actually Irish holidays. If you look at the term, a lot of people practice what's called Samhain. Some people pronounce it Samhain. Samhain is the old Irish word for November. And it's actually, some people do it October 31st, but technically you do it at midnight, which makes it November 1st, which is the beginning of November. Thus, Samhain being the old Irish word for November. You can do the same thing with Lunasan, right? We're in August now. August 1st was Lunasan. The old Irish word for August is Lunasan. So, it's interesting because they try to envelop that. Speaking again of modern heathen practitioners, there's a group. We won't name the group, but I was watching a video of one of them, and they were talking about doing a celebration. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was either Mabon or one of the other Druid festivals. And all I can think of is, why are you celebrating the Wheel of the Year? I mean, I guess technically you could tie it together with some of the Irish traditions, because Dublin is actually a Viking settlement. I don't know if you know this, but like, so when the Viking, during the Viking Age, the Swedish, the Danish, the Norwegians, after a while the Icelanders, Iceland and Greenland are settlements from them. They actually traveled down to Ireland and raided it. And Dublin is actually a Viking settlement. So there are people in Dublin, people who have genetic history there, that can trace their genetics back to the Scandinavian countries. So I guess technically you can kind of tie it in there in a way, but I think you're kind of pushing it, because if you look at the Scandinavian countries, you didn't know that? Oh, well, I'm glad. And this is why I'm sharing this information. And by the way, and I'm highly encouraging you, anyone else watching, and anyone who watches this after the live is gone, look this up. Don't take my word for anything. Listen to some of what I have to say that I've run across. Go validate it for yourself. Find it. I mean, you can literally go and Google, for example, was Dublin a Viking settlement, for example. Actually, I think one of my ancestors died in Dublin or near Dublin, because he was one of the raiders that came over from Norway. Barefoot. King Barefoot. Harold Barefoot? What was his first name? Barefoot was his nickname, though. I'm going to have to go look up in my family tree. I'll look it up later. It's not that important. But anyway. Yeah, but you know, they had raids there all the time. They had raids all along the western sea border, going out of where you see the bottom of, so here's Sweden, here's Norway, and right below it you got Denmark, and across the little water area, real technical here on geography, you have the Germanic regions and stuff, which is now modern day like Poland, Russia type of an area. And then you have, to the left of that, you have Iceland, and then you have the United Kingdom, and you have Ireland, and all of those are there. So like this whole channel in there, they went up all and down those banks and traded, raided, settled. They sacked a lot of stuff. I read that the Celtics influenced Vikings. Is this true? I believe that there is going to be some of that. So from what I was reading and researching, and I don't know the actual location I found it, but from what I can recall from what I've read and watched, because I watch videos on YouTube, I watch other content creators, I look up articles online, I read books, and then I talk to other individuals that are also into it. But as I understand it, yes, there's some other cultural influences, period. Not specifically Celtic, but just period, with some of the Scandinavian people. Because when they went on their Vikings, they would go and trade sometimes, raid or settle, or they'd take people back. They'd take thralls, which is their slaves. They beat the crap out of anyone they could and take back whoever the people were and take them back as thralls. So you're going to learn things from their culture, from interacting. So I think there is going to be some cultural influences, yes. Celts is interesting. So the Celtic society, a lot of people try to associate like, oh, you know, Druidry, that's a Celtic practice, right? Celtic is a language group, and it's a large region. If you look up the Celtic areas, they were all different language groups. One of them was Gaelic. So the Gaelic language was around Gaul, which I believe is France today, and Ireland, that type of an area, so the Gaelic tongue. So, yeah, so Celtic is kind of, I guess a lot of the tribes had some similar traits during that time period, but from what I'd been researching, I think there is a possibility that the Celts died out and they were different peoples. Like some people like to try to say that modern Irish are descended from the Celts, and I don't know if that's necessarily true. Researching the history of Ireland gets pretty fuzzy after you go back to a certain time period. But apparently, if you want to go to Celtic Druid lore, which is also stuff that I researched, then you start talking about apparently there at one time was a race of Fomorians, which are like big monsters. So now you're getting into like lores, legends, and mythologies. And apparently the Tuatha Dé Danann, who was basically their deities. So if you think of like Bri or Brigid, if you think of Cernunnos, or some of the deities, Lunasan is named after Lu, what is a god associated with the sun. So apparently the Tuatha Dé Danann, which are the children of the goddess Danu, that's what Tuatha Dé Danann translates into, came onto the island of Ireland and found the Fomorians and beat the crap out of them and killed them. And then apparently the Celts might have come in and might have potentially, based upon one or two stories, killed out the inhabitants there, the Tuatha Dé Danann, which is why you have the fairy mounds, because that's where they were buried. So the fairy realm is underground, and you have the lesser fae, and then you have the greater fae, which is basically the Tuatha Dé Danann. That's one possible explanation and story. And then you have later the Irish who came in and killed out the Celts. The name Ireland itself is actually, it's named after a goddess. I think Iru is her name, and it's basically Ireland means the island of the goddess Iru. I think that's her name. I might have to look that up and double check that. But it's literally Ireland's name's named after that. And when I was saying that you can actually look at modern cultures to get some information, if you look at modern Irish Catholicism, they have saints. And if you look up these saints, you have a Saint Bridget. Saint Bridget has all of the traits and associations, as did the Tuatha Dé Danann, the goddess Brigid Bri, almost exactly. If you look up Saint Cornelius, almost identical to Cernunnos. So again, you have like, you have in modern practices associations from the past. That's why I don't think people give up their traditions. But yeah, as far as the Celtic influences, like I don't know if I could point to any, if there's specific Celtic influences into the Vikings, because I mean the ships are completely Scandinavian, 100%. You have similar core weapons. Now their shields were different, as far as I know. I'm trying to think of Celtic shields. I can't picture them. I know how the Viking shields were built, how they looked, and how they worked. These both had spears, but almost everyone had spears. They had similar tunic outfits and slacks. They had similar footwear, but I don't know if that's necessarily an influence there. So as far as spirituality goes, I don't think so, because as far as I understand, the Celts and the ancient Irish had their Tuatha Dé Danann, who were very different from the Aesir, Vanir, and Jotnar of the Scandinavian people. What are your thoughts on the Druids? Their history seems very mysterious. I think the Druids are like the Vikings. They're hyped up. People make false associations. So we don't have any direct knowledge of what the ancient Druids did or who they were from first-hand accounts. We have second-hand accounts. For example, one of the recent videos I've been doing, because I've been researching this recently, is one of the oldest references is the Gaelic Wars, written by Julius Caesar in, I think it was 53 CE. And he talks about the Druids in there, and he talks about some of how they were. Now, there's translations from Latin to English. I think it was written in Latin. I believe that's what Julius Caesar would have written the original one. Whatever language it is, I can't read it. But so this translated into English. You can read some English translations there from Julius Caesar. There's Pliny the Elder, Strabo. There's a lot of folks that wrote about the Druids. Now, the Druids, we do know a few things. We know they had three classes or grades: bards, ovates, and druids. We know that that was an oral tradition, and they were taught by speaking, and they would learn in triads threefold wisdom sayings. I remember reading that Caesar hated the Druids. Yes, he did, very much. One of the reasons is because the Druids used to do human sacrifices. They also weren't a huge fan of their animal sacrifices. The thing with animal sacrifice, and this goes both for the Druids as well as the Scandinavian, the Vikings and stuff, like, see, they didn't really have a name in Scandinavia. They didn't have a name for their religion. It was part of everyday life. In the Celtic, Irish type of cultures, they had a class of people called the Druids. Interestingly enough, we call them Druids. I don't think they use the term Druid for themselves. And the name, basically, I've heard of people translating it to mean like oak people, but they were learned, wise individuals. And we actually have here. I'll pull it up. I have a link to it because I have it saved because I was reading it recently. Direct words from Julius Caesar himself about the Druids, which again, he's one of the older ones, and there's other things that you can read about too. It's not just Caesar. More reading. Yeah, so you can look up the Audict Maurian, which is a testament of Maurian, a statement from the Ethic Rules. That's an interesting book. There's Cormac's instructions to his grandson, the Brehon laws of the Fenacos. I might be mispronouncing these. The Celtic triads, the myths and legends. There's some other ones too, and then you can start going back in time. I think there's like something like the Book of Four Seasons, but specifically Julius Caesar's the Gaelic Wars. Let me pull this up. So, huge amount of writing here, but if you specifically look for Druids, you can get down to section 6.13, and he'll talk about stuff like this. The Druids are engaged in things sacred, conducted the public and the private sacrifices, and interpreted all matters of religion. To these are a large number of the young men resort for the purpose of instruction, and they are in great honor among them, for they determine respecting almost all controversies, public and private, and if any crime has been perpetrated, if murder has been committed, if there be any dispute about an inheritance, if any about boundaries, these same persons decide it, if they decree rewards and punishments, if anyone, either in private or public capacity, has not submitted to their decision, they excommunicate him from the sacrifices. This among them is the most heavy punishment. Those who have been thus excommunicated are considered to be criminal and immoral. All shun them and avoid their company. So, I mean, we get these writings like this that talk about the Druids as being these like lawyers, priests, leaders. If you think about like modern society, if you took all of the big heads of the community, like take doctors and lawyers and teachers and priests and put them all together into one office, that's basically what a Druid was. And interestingly enough, since we don't know what they used to do because their traditions died out, there are theories that the Druids went underground and they became part of Catholicism, that the Catholic priests took on a lot of what they used to do. We also have writings where people talk about it took like something like 27 years to learn all their lore. A lot of the stuff they would have learned, we learn today in modern school. Like today, we have a good education system. They didn't have that back then. So a lot of the math and arithmetic and science and writing and all that stuff that we do in school, a lot of that was probably part of ancient Druid training. It disappeared, and the term was brought back about 300 years ago, and Christians were actually using the term Druid, and they kind of used it similar to the term philosopher, someone who researches and divines into nature and how life exists and how we're part of it, and sort of the interactions between, like, through astrology and science of how the world works. Then they started rebuilding some of their stories and lores and poems because the Druids were known to tell stories and be storytellers because words have power. So modern Druids, Neo-Druids, take inspiration from what little is left, but they're not the same thing. We don't know what the Druids used to do. I could probably do several videos on the Druids because them and the Vikings, the Viking culture, the Norse time period, Norse Scandinavian time period, those are probably two of the topics that I've spent the most time researching and studying over the last 20-something years. I didn't start on them 27 years ago. I just started on New Age stuff about 27 years ago. But those two particular topics I have a great love for. So hopefully that answers your question, even though it's a little long-winded. Their history seems very mysterious. Yes. Yep. That's why I think there is a... Going off, what are your thoughts on the Druids? Their history seems very mysterious. There is a huge difference, in my opinion, between the ancient Druids, which we don't know about, in modern Neo Druids. It's a reconstruction revival thing. It's new pieces of the past put together with new bullshit. I actually have a video here on my channel on YouTube about the Druid's Prayer, and I also have one about Iolo Morganlug, which was one of the Welsh Druids who put together a lot of what modern Druidry is based off of, because he took a lot of the old stories and put them together. And then you said you remember reading that Caesar hated the Druids. I think I talked about that too. Cool. So I think I answered all your questions there. So if there's any other ones, let me know. Getting on about an hour here, so I think I will start answering a few questions in chat instead of going off on another tangent, because I could talk about some of this stuff for hours. That's why I started making videos, sharing ideas. Very interesting stuff. I love hearing your thoughts. I wish there was more people in my area that thought like this. Yeah, it can be frustrating, and it's hard to find people. I do have a Discord if you want to talk more regularly, and I am going to try to do more lives. I don't know how often I can do these, but I'm hoping I can do them once a week, because, yeah, I think having interactions and conversations is helpful. I know when I started, I was eager for anything I could find, and it was very, very hard to find sources of any kind. So I ate up any source I could find, including crappy books, and I still have a lot of them. My wife might frown upon me showing the room, but over here, which is usually behind me, there's a ton of books. The top shelf is all fantasy books, but this shelf here and this shelf here is all New Age spiritual books. A lot of them are Llewellyn books. Some of them are not. And then I've got a couple more over here that are... I've got like magic books for like tricks magics, and I have a couple Dungeons and Dragons books, but then I have Blood and Mistletoe by Ronald Hutton. Great book if you want to research about the Druids. Then I have the Book of Druidry by Isaac Bonowitz. We have some bad things we can say about Bonowitz, but he still brought a lot to the community, even though he did some very bad things. Modern Coin Magic, Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's Fighting Method, Tao of Jeet Kune Do, Men of Terror, which, like I said, that was William R. Short. Great reference, great book. You'll love. If you want to learn about the Vikings, buy that book. Like, seriously, Men of Terror, cannot recommend it enough. In fact, I might do like an actual book review on it sometime. Then I have Viking myths and sagas, and then I have Celtic stories over there too. So I've got quite a few books over here as well, but most of them are over here. And they're fun to read. They're fun to learn about. To me, researching what the Druids might have done and what the Scandinavian, whatever, heathen movement, what they might have done, that's me looking into my past and my history. That's what they're my ancestors. I've got ancestors that came from Ireland. I have ancestors that came from the Scandinavian regions. Like I said, my mother was born in Iceland, straight up right there, close connection. I've got a few other, I'm a mutt. My parents come from all over the place. But I like learning about it. I think learning about old cultures is fun, but it's frustrating trying to find good sources and good information. And that's what I want to accomplish with my YouTube channel, is I want to find individuals who are seeking, who want to learn, and I want to help you find stuff. I don't want to tell you and dictate to you like I'm all-knowing. I am repeating to you things I remember reading, watching, or hearing. And I want to help you find the same things. I don't want to lord information over people and, I know it and you don't. No, I want to say, this is what I remember. Here's where you can find it. Best of luck. Let me know if you want to talk about it. Do you like illusionary entertainment magic? If so, who's your favorite magician? Lance Burton, hands down. Definitely my favorite magician. There's a lot of really good ones. I mean, obviously, Copperfield's fantastic. Houdini. I like Houdini a lot. There's a couple other ones, too, and I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head. There's other ones. Harry Blackstone Jr. But yeah, Lance Burton's my favorite. That's who a magician should be. And I do have some trick videos up here as well. I do tricks that are actual straight-up tricks. They're not real well, they are real magic. I would argue that tricks are real magic in the sense that it is a type of magic in this performance art. That is a manifestation of enjoyment that you're doing. You are bringing your audience into a world of fantasy and believing that the impossible is possible. The actual trick itself, like floating or vanishing stuff, is fake, but it's still a type of real magic, in my opinion. That's what I would call it. Lance Burton is the boss, and I got to see Copperfield live. Nice, nice. I've got some videos up. If you go to my playlist, I have a magician section. I do a couple tricks. I do them over dramatized just for fun, because I like to talk in a real severe voice and go kind of crazy with it. But yeah, it's Master of the Elements, Blaze, Master of the Elements. Got my own intro and everything, but it's on this YouTube channel. I always wanted to find the most accurate information I can find. Me too. And it's frustrating because it's hard. It is really, really hard. So for example, if you name a topic, I can share some of the resources I liked. That's why I tried to do some name drops. That's why I mentioned some books. But yeah, definitely. I'll have to go check it out. Sounds fun. Yeah, right now I've been reading, like I said, I've been reading a Radio the Gospel of Witches online, and I bought a copy of the book off of Amazon. It's from 1899. And I was looking through that, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of things, because it was a reminder of how difficult it is to find stuff, and how there's all this hearsay. I did a video, my biggest video here on YouTube is Wicca versus Witchcraft. I have over 100,000 views. It's the only video that's ever gone, I wouldn't say viral. It's the only video that blew up at all on my channel, because I don't get a lot of views. But that one there, I've had people argue with me over me saying that Wicca is a new path. And back then, that was like 13 years ago, back then it got me thinking, like, well, why do people not have this information when it's so readily available? So I started reading more books, getting into more stuff, and trying my best to share more information so people can read it. Have you ever researched the apocryphal text, Gnostic Gospels? I have not. I have heard of the Gnostic Gospels, but no, I have not. Yeah, most of my stuff, like I said, most of it has been centered around, it started with witchcraft and Wicca, because that was how I was introduced to the New Age spirituality stuff. Then I started moving into Druidry and some of the heathen revival movements. I spent some time with Taoism, or at least the Western philosophy of it. I have researched a little bit into Shinto, Buddhism, both large vehicle and small vehicle Buddhism, because apparently a lot of people don't realize Buddhism is actually a derivative from Hinduism. It comes from India, and everyone like talks about Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is specific to Japan because it traveled. It was brought to different parts, and the part that was brought to China by Dalmo was actually Bohidharma. When he brought it over, I believe they call him Talmo in China. It's actually called Chan Buddhism. So the Shaolin monks are not specifically Buddhist monks, they're Chan Buddhist monks. And then there's Tibetan Buddhism, like a whole bunch of different stuff like that. I've looked into some of the shamanistic practices, but I don't like using that term for various reasons. Some of the indigenous traditions. I got a chance to speak with someone from a Cherokee tribe, and apparently they were talking about they don't have names for their spiritual practitioners either. He actually said that they refer to their spiritual practitioners as pipe makers in his tribe. He is a card-carrying tribe member, so it's not like he's just saying that he has indigenous blood. He is actually part of a tribe. And he was talking about the fact that in the old times, they didn't have job titles or names because everyone knew who you were in your tribe and community. You didn't need a name to separate yourself out. So I thought that was interesting. What else have I searched? There's some different folk Chinese traditions that I've looked at. And I've looked into Christianity, many forms of Christianity, Catholicism, Protestantism, Mormonism. I looked at a couple things, so I think I'm sure I'm missing some things, but yeah, mostly it's going to be the Druid or the Norse stuff. That's the stuff that fascinates me and interests me the most. So that's where I spend most of my time, especially the last couple of years. What specifically did you want to bring up about the Gnostic Gospels? If you had a question, I can't answer it, but if there's something that you really liked that you wanted to share, I'm all ears, or all eyes, since I'll be reading it. I'll have to go check it out. Sounds fun. Oh, my videos, yeah. Please do. Drop a thumb up, like, and follow. Support my YouTube efforts. I hope my fan's not picking up in the background. I didn't even think about it, but it's so hot in here, so I want my fan on. Probably should pull my hair up too, because trying to. I always got to make your hair look pretty for the live. It's just how it is. Men can enjoy their hair and beard too. So, but yeah, I'm burning up, so fan stays on. But hopefully I've got a new phone here, and it's pretty decent so far on the video and sound quality. So far, that's why I figured I would start doing lives again, is since I have a phone and I don't have to use my computer and look up at a weird angle. Now I'm looking down at a weird angle, so that's fun. Okay. All right, so if we have no more questions, I might end the live here. If folks have other things they want to discuss or bring up or ask about. I know I jumped around in topics a lot. I didn't stay on the topic of witchcraft and why it's New Age, but I found a little book of the Gnostic Gospels from a Goodwill. I should get to it sometime. Nice. Good find. I always liked finding older books. I've got a couple that are super, super old. I got really old editions of White Fang and stuff. Most of my stuff, though, is more newer books, but I do like the old ones. I just think it's so cool to have that history behind it. Like I said, you can, if you go to archive.org, you can find a lot of good books on there too. This is the one I'm reading right now. See if the link will work. I don't know if the link will work or not. You can click it if you want to. But that is the Aradia, or the Gospel of Witches, and it reminds me why some people. So a lot of people talk about witchcraft and talk about it being evil, and of course, modern practitioners of witchcraft, which I am not one. They will talk about no, it's not evil. And I'm not saying it is evil. But if you look at books like this, I can understand why they would say that. Like this book is written, like I said, in 1899, and they're talking about Diana apparently having a brother named Lucifer, and it sounds very much like the Christian Lucifer, having a child named Aradia, and Aradia comes down to Earth and teaches humankind witchcraft. Well, that's a pretty interesting start. And then the spells, like I said, are in Italian in that book. And they're translated into English, and some of the spells straight up are telling the deities, Diana, or even, I think there might be one, Lucifer, are telling them straight up to do their bidding or suffer if they don't do what they're asking. So it's kind of like they're giving an ultimatum with asking for a blessing, and I'm like, this is kind of ate up. I'm not gonna lie. I if that would have been the first book I ever saw on witchcraft, would not have been interested in witchcraft at all. My first book on witchcraft, I had to buy a copy because my ex-wife kept her copy. But it was A Grimoire of Shadows by Ed Fitch. And I have my copy over here on the wall still. Thanks for the link. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can flip through it. You can find a lot of stuff on Internet Archive for older books. But yeah, if you look through it, it's fairly interesting. Right now I'm on chapter 3. How Diana Made the Stars and the Rain. Diana was the first created before all creation. In her were all things. Out of her the first darkness. She divided herself into darkness and light she was divided. Lucifer, her brother and son, herself and her other half was the light. And when Diana saw that the light was so beautiful, the light which was her other half, her brother Lucifer, she yearned for it with exceeding great desire, wishing to receive the light again into her darkness, to swallow it up in rapture and delight. She trembled with desire. That desire was the dawn. But Lucifer, the light, fled from her and would not yield to her wishes. He was the light which flies in the most distant parts of heaven, the mouse which flies before the cat. Like, it's definitely an interesting book. Now, the interesting thing, too, if you look at the term Lucifer, at this time, in 1899, we already had established the Christian version of Lucifer. But if you look up and research, here's what you should search for. If you search for Lucifer and Venus, apparently Lucifer originally was a name before the Christian Bible, and it was another name for the planet Venus. It was the morning star, and they thought at the time apparently Venus was a star, not a planet, because you could see it only during the morning hours or something in the sky, as I understand it from a couple of websites. But yeah, Lucifer was just another name for Venus. And then it became a name for an archangel that apparently fell from heaven in Christian mythology. And now some people will try to tell you that Lucifer and Satan are the same being, and they're not. Because when I was young, I was raised Catholic, and I had to go to Sunday classes where they taught me a lot about Catholicism. And Lucifer and Satan are two different beings. Lucifer fell from heaven, and they actually make a reference in one part of the Bible that Satan fell like Lucifer did. So it's a different being. Have you studied ancient Egypt at all? A lot of the occult seems to be influenced by Egypt, like Kabbalion. I don't know what Kabbalion is, but I have studied a little bit of the Egyptian traditions. Not a lot, because it's hard for me to find authentic stuff. Again, issues. One of the things that I actually once heard that modern witchcraft was based upon the Jade Tablet, which is something they found in Egypt, which apparently has a lot of the different practices you do with, like, altar ceremonial magic. But as I did more research, apparently that's more related to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which I've also done research on. The different deities in the Egyptian practices, like, apparently the names were pronounced differently. And I actually once found a creator that went through them all and confirmed something I was told by somebody who used to be in one of my polytheistic groups. So I used to run a spiritual group, and then that fell apart. And then I joined a spiritual group, and the leader quit and had me take over, and then it slowly fell apart anyway. So I guess I just don't run groups very well. I guess the biggest problem was the old leader used to have it at a bookshop. When I took over, it was a small group of them, and we met at my house, and usually it was outside, and I would prefer to meet at the park and not my house. They wanted to be indoors. Like, okay, we're studying polytheism and our connection with nature. Why are we going indoors? And one of them was big into Egyptian stuff, and one of the things that stood out to me was Horus. So they talk about the god Horus, and apparently his name was pronounced Haru, and not pronounced Horus. And this other individual, there's a YouTube video, and he goes through all the names on how to pronounce the Egyptian god names, also pronounced it very similar to that. So that was interesting. And apparently Osiris, who's supposed to be Horus's father, some people say it is the same deity, which I think is weird. So yeah, no, there's some things that I know about the Egyptian traditions, just not a lot. So just little bits and pieces. Sorry, I like talking about this stuff. Like I said, that's why I figured I'll do some more lives. Seems like people also like to talk about it too. So, but yeah, I'm not sure what Kabbalion is. Kabbalion, study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece. Oh, it's a book too. Internet Archive. Let's see if it's on the Internet Archive. I'll save it and take a look at it later. Yep. Thank you. I'll check that out. Hello, Voom6666. So apparently that particular book is actually on Internet Archive. I highly recommend reading the Kabbalion if you get the chance. There are a few audiobooks of it on YouTube. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, this looks like it would be interesting to read. A study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece by 3 initiates. What's the year on this? Copyright 1908. And like I said, and I said this in my last live, a lot of the New Age stuff comes from the early 1900s. Drives me nuts, which is fine. I mean, it doesn't mean it's bad, but it's just like, yeah, a lot do. Introduction. We take great pleasure in presenting to the attention of students and investigators of the secret doctrines this little work based upon the world-old Hermetic teachings. There has been so little written upon the subject, notwithstanding the countless references to the teachings in the many works upon occultism, that the many earnest searchers after the arcane truths would doubtless welcome the appearance of the present volume. Yeah, no, this is something at least catches my interest, so I'm going to add this to my bookmarks. Let's see. Polytheism books. Save. Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that reference. That's what I'm talking about. Let's share stuff like that. Let's share books to read. If I can find them online, great. If there's some place I need to actually buy them, I'm fine with buying books, especially if they're good books. Like, I mean, like you see, I've got like a good, I don't know, 40, 50 books on some of the arcane occult type stuff because I like researching it. I have a copy of that book. Nice, nice. Did you read it yet? Son of Sothis? I think there's a delay in the stream. How hot is my phone getting? Since this is a new phone. Not. Oh yeah, it is getting pretty hot. I probably should. An hour might have been pushing it. Maybe I should put this in front of the fan. I'll just hold my phone for the last couple of minutes that I'm streaming. Okay. Anyway. I haven't the whole thing yet. Okay, fair enough. Well, if you care, you are all welcome to join my Discord. Chat on there at will. I got some spiritual channel sections, but most of the folks that join my Discord are gamers because I game a lot in my free time. But yeah, no, yeah, there's a lot of books to add to my reading list. But thank you all for hanging out and joining the live. Now that we're at about an hour, I'm probably going to end it for today, and I will probably try to stream again soon. So, anyway, may your path be fruitful, and thanks for hanging out. Have a good day. Much love, Blaze. I really appreciate the live stream and your time. I have to go. Hope many blessings come your way. Until next time. You too, creature. Take care.